Okay, let's call to order the Riverfront Design Committee meeting for September 6, 2018. Welcome, everybody. We'll start with roll call. Paula?
John Joyce.
Here.
Scott Howard.
Here.
Michelle Dean. Here. Jonathan Heisel. Don Kasperite.
Here.
Barbara Larson. John Postic.
Here.
Dana Templeton. Here. And Mike Voorhees.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to look over the minutes from our last meeting dated July 5th? If anybody has any comments or corrections, otherwise I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Second.
Did you get that? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Item number 3, cases withdrawn, there are none. Item number 4, continuance requests, there are none. Nothing on the consent docket. Number 6, cases for individual consideration. The first one is SRCA 18-00015. Laura?
Good morning. So about a year ago, you all had an application before you for a trailhead, and so most of you, I think, were on the committee at that point. And so this is furthering making improvements on the trail. In partnering with Oklahoma City Community Foundation, the Parks Department is requesting permission to plant, I think it's called the 1,000 Trees program, as well as some other improvements on this section of the trail, which is 3 or 4 miles wide. I am not a trail user. Hopefully some of you are, so you'll benefit from these. As you can see from the staff report, the only issue that staff had to bring up was the issue that some of the trees and landscaping they're proposing are not on the Riverfront list, which is included in the Riverfront ordinance, and there are some that aren't on the Trees and Plants of Oklahoma City 2016, which is also a document that we use when we review landscaping. I am not a landscaper. I'm not a landscape architect. And so, as I stated in the staff report, I'm deferring to the Parks Department. They've indicated reasons, in which I included in the staff report, for why certain things were selected. One reason was to continue some landscaping that was started many years ago with similar landscaping, and I think at least one of you is very familiar with that. But Brandon is here he has his own PowerPoint to present to you. I didn't know if you had questions for me. We included on this, I know it's kind of shaky, that my hand was shaking when I added the trail to this map, just so you could see this actually spans more than one scenic river district, which made it very interesting when we were pulling the staff report together. But you can see just how significant this section is. And you have the trailhead that you approved last year was along May. I've got my hand on it right here. And that was where they made the north-south connection to the trails going north. I also updated the list of trails in the staff report, which I find fascinating when I look at just how many miles of trails we have, as well as I got to add one that's currently in the planning stage that wasn't even on the list last year. So that's exciting that we're continuing that, and that's not in your area, but it's just overall trails in the city. So with that being said, I also want to thank the Parks Department for providing me with all these pictures so I didn't have to go out along the trail and take the pictures for you to see. So we just looked through the pictures they had just to show, the trails going under the roads, and they were showing where they want to put some benches, some natural rock form benches underneath those, as well as what's around the trail. And it runs the gambit from residential that might or might not be lived in to vacant land to utilities to office type uses. So there's all kinds of things going on the trail. So with that being said, I was going to defer to your applicant, and let me jump down. Staff is recommending approval.
Okay. Tell us who you are.
Okay, while we're waiting to get that up, my name is Brandon Boydson with the Parks Department. Appreciate you all's time here this morning. So Laura's kind of already given a pretty good little background of where this is at, kind of where it's going, so we can kind of get going through this. But so the area in question, as she's already kind of pointed out, is primarily focused on the north side from where the trail currently ends on the west end at Portland, all the way down to Western. There we go. So just kind of some of the key areas we were kind of looking at as we were going through this process and kind of seeing what was there. As was already mentioned, the connection with the West River, or the Will Rogers Trail that was recently installed. And so there's that connection there. Some of these are old satellite images before some of this construction was completed. But this all kind of goes back in the background as how these trails are also interconnected and trying to make them more user-friendly, and we believe that through this process and the Communities Foundation interest in this, that we can increase the user interest and usability of these trails, or this piece of a trail. So again, she's already kind of pointed out some of the backgrounds. We've got Wheeler Park on the east end of it. We've got the trailhead for the Will Rogers Trail there in the middle, and then the trail currently stops at Portland. You can jump south and take the south trail on over, and it connects all the way in through the West River. So I mean, it's all interconnected, but kind of where we're at. So the existing landscape, I know Laura's kind of went through a couple of real quick pictures, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at them as well, but the existing landscape is, for the most part, wide open. There was some minimal landscape that was done originally with the project when the trail was originally put in a number of years ago, and the river was improved the way it is now. Some of those have survived, some of them haven't. I know there were some concerns and some budget issues as to why the landscape didn't really get to continue. Now we have that opportunity to come back in and really bring this back up. So again, just a couple of, there's bottom right, prime example of some of the landscape that's out there that just didn't get a chance to make it. So we have some ideas on trying to improve that so it doesn't happen with this project. Real quickly, just a overview is the Oklahoma City Community Foundation. They have their 50th anniversary coming up, and so they have a desire to put in their 1,000 trees along the river. 1,000 is not a set number, it kind of varies one side or the other, but that's the idea, is to really bring some enhancements to this area with the help of Parks Department and kind of that joint effort. And so through the addition of those trees and bringing up some of those, what is now just wide open Bermuda areas, pulling those into more of a sculpted native area with some prairie grasses, some wildflowers, things of that nature, provide some interest there, as well as the benefits of the pollinators and the seeding elements there as well, to be able to, because right now, if anybody's used that portion of the trail, once you get past Western going west, there's really no place to stop and sit, and so you're kind of in it for the long haul. And so if we have tourists and guests that come into town and not familiar with our trails, they may find themselves kind of stuck. And so this provides an opportunity to alleviate some of that, provide places to rest and stop and enjoy the scenery and the environment around. So just kind of an overview of some of the key goals is, again, provide some of the seating areas, but also through the process is to increase our tree canopy, kind of start that process of bringing this back to a riverine type setting where the riverine also meets the prairie, so there'll be some elements of both. And also in doing this, by bringing back some of those native areas, it also helps to bring down our maintenance costs over years. Up front, not so much, but once we get them established and once we kind of get those up and going, that cuts down on those mowed areas that we are currently having to constantly stay on top of. And so this has been a pretty involved joint effort with the Park Planning Division, as well as the Grounds and Maintenance and Natural Resources, in addition to some other folks that are fairly well specialized in this type of native areas, as well as the trees. As Laura kind of mentioned, some of the tree species that we have on our list are not on the current list for this area as far as on the Scenic River portion of it. However, we've been working with the Grounds Division's Forestry Service in what kind of canopy we need to be trying to put back in here and trying to use that as a guide, as well as what we can get locally sourced and available to be able to put in. We're talking about 1,000 trees. It's not just going down to the local nursery store and loading up a truck. They're having to go through some pretty good searches trying to find what we can get available. And so some of that is also a driving factor in it. So it's not just on what's available, but it's also balanced with what we feel, what our forestry division feels is going to be the most appropriate for this area. And so this is starting here on the west end. Excuse me. Portland on the left side of your screen, May on the right side. Again, the trail currently kind of dead ends at Portland unless you cross the river and go on the south side of the trail, which you can either do that and make a full loop. But there's a few spots where it gets kind of narrow, and so you can see we've kind of just color-coded some ideas for the grass areas. In your packet, there was also the actual plans of what we anticipate those areas being specifically. But for this, the color kind of helps to visualize it a little bit easier. But you can see kind of different areas of monocultures and the fact that the grasses are moving through the landscape, kind of similar to the fact of what happens with native grasses in the winds here in the plains. You see them moving and waving with the winds. It also pulls back to the river itself, kind of wandering its way through the city. And so you kind of see that theme all the way through as far as how the grasses are laid out and how the trees are also kind of clumped and groved in a natural element around the trail and around in specific areas to try to maximize the benefit. So instead of trying to put in just a row of trees and one every so many feet, we try to clump them together and make it points of interest. And so that as these grow, mature, and develop, we kind of have these small little forested areas along the trail that can further enhance the user's interest. As far as just kind of a point of reference, you can kind of see a little blue star on there. Those are the existing irrigation pumps that are out there that our grounds crews are currently going through and getting those flushed out and bringing those back online so that we can have irrigation when we put these trees in. And so that way we can further ensure that the investment that the Community Foundation is investing in this is going to be able to stay. And so that's part of that process. I know it's one of the concerns is if we're putting in 1,000 trees, how are we going to take care of it? We have to go out with a water truck or what, but this is kind of what we're doing. We're going back in and revitalizing that irrigation system, bringing it back online to make it as useful as possible as well as maintainable. So that kind of, again, that maintenance aspect is kind of what a big driving point of this project is as well as aesthetics, is making sure that we can maintain this as a department. Another point of reference on the far right side, there's kind of that orange asterisk that's up there. That's that trailhead there at where the Will Rogers intersects. And so the kind of as just a talking point, just kind of mostly for a discussion for a different day, that is also another opportunity for a potential other enhancement to that area that maybe as funding becomes available, we can put in some other amenities in that area to help further serve this trail. And so kind of moving along, we get, now we have May on the left side or the west side of your screen. You got Penn on the right. So we have another couple of options. The little smaller circles you see kind of where the trail goes underneath some of our existing roadways or where we're looking at adding some of our natural seeding elements. And so instead of trying to put in benches and things underneath those areas where they're going to be exposed to a little bit harsher elements as all the salts and stuff that come off of the bridges from the runoff and the de-icing and all that, the maintenance nightmare that would be to provide that type of a seeding. We're looking at providing natural stone elements. There's also a few of those that we're working at addressing that have erosion that now currently, if you've been on the trail, soil after heavy rain, you see the trail is now silted in from everything that runs across the trail. And so now those stones benches can also serve multiple purposes. People stop as it is right now to those trails, especially in the hot summer, kind of take a break. Now they have a place to rest, as well as keeping some of that debris from the erosion off of our trails. There's also some other key seeding elements that are just out in the landscape, in the tree groves, and the prairies themselves that would be more appropriate for more of your standard bench type as well. So there's a couple different seeding elements that are involved with this. Okay, next chunk over. Okay, we now have Penn on your left, Western on the right. Okay, again, Western is kind of our eastern terminus of this particular project for the simple fact that from western east, the landscape is already pretty well established and in. There's a pretty sustainable landscape that goes across Wheeler Park, and then kind of made a nice, clean area to be able to make a break. So that allowed us to, instead of trying to stretch this landscape out, allowed us to kind of compress a little bit to make it more focused and more invested in this key area. One of the things is we do have a kind of a narrow spot between the river and the highway right-of-way, pretty well mid-screen, just a little bit left, right between Penn and, oh, yes, right there, thank you. And so we kind of go back to a little bit of a screening element to try to help dampen some of the noise from the highway, as well as provide some, screening aspects to it as well. I know there's some architectural elements in that area for some of the walls and things that are on the highway, but we can add that extra layer to it as well. Then we get on further back over, and from the west kind of moving to the east, we go from a heavier mix of native grasses and prairie elements to more of limited areas, kind of providing a transition from the West River Trail, which is wild in and of itself, to a more of a sculpted prairie, and then into more of the heavily used, intense use type areas from Wheeler Park on down to Boat District that becomes more of a standard managed and maintained mowed turf and landscape elements. So it kind of helps provide that transition from the western and the outskirts part of town for this trail, kind of through a transition phase to bring people into the downtown area, and then as the Scissortail Parks get completed, that kind of brings that also into downtown. So we're kind of looking at this whole system as a way to move people along, kind of in a natural environment as that transition comes along. So just kind of a real quick overview of some of the landscape elements that we're looking at right now, working with specialists that do a lot of native plantings and seeds and figure out what kind of varieties and things work. But things like the blue gamma, the Indian grass, little blue stem, so these types of grasses that are native to this area and would do well in this type of environment is what we're going back in with. And so that provides some color, some texture, that movement. So it's not just a single flat plane of an environment. Again, that extra little color of those paths and pockets of wildflowers provide interest in pollinators. Again, not just the human interaction, but also the insect and the bird interaction as well. And then also for kind of a later point, we come back in with some signage. Some of you may also be aware that, the trail-wide master plan signage has just been through the process, and so we'll be working with how to implement that signage in addition to providing areas that further explain what we're doing here to provide that complete system with design, signage, and the overall user experience. But that'll be kind of coming back in as a later item. Just kind of an overview of where we are aiming for on timing. As everything goes through this process, the Community Foundation is looking to start planting this fall, through the winter, and be able to finish that up for their anniversary time in spring. And then, of course, along with that comes, bringing the irrigation online so that as that comes up, we can maintain and start off. And as well as, looking at the timing for, certain grasses are more apt and more appropriate to be planted at certain times. And so making sure that we're trying to hit all those key times and not just, trying to blanket everything, but trying to be very strategic in how we go about this to make sure that, it's in small enough chunks that our maintenance division can maintain and deal and work with it, and make sure that this is going to be successful all the way through. Any questions that you all may have for me at this time?
I don't really have a question, but I'm very pleased to see that this project is moving forward. We were involved in the original design of the trails and the landscape portion with the Corps of Engineers, and it's interesting that if you look at what the river used to be before it was channelized, it was very natural and very native, and that's one of the reasons why the plant material list is different from the Oklahoma City list. It was intended to recreate the natural environment, and so I have no problem with going back with native type trees, and I think it's great. In the eastern basin, we started out with about 5,000 trees. The middle section, it dwindled to about 2,000 trees, and then the last section, which is the furthest west section, I think we had 500 or 600 trees, because the Corps of Engineers wanted to focus on reforestation on the eastern basin, wetlands in the middle section, and then the riverine ecosystem at the west end. So that's kind of why there's a transition of heavy planted trees to hardly anything. But I'm glad to see this moving forward, and would like to thank the Oklahoma City Community Foundation for funding this project. I think it's a very, very good project. Thank you.
Any more questions? A question, anybody from the audience? No? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
Second.
Let's go with John. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion is approved.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a statement, please.
Sure.
I know, Brian, you've been very involved in this, the driver. I just want you to know I appreciate your effort.
Item number 7, other business. We have a meeting scheduled for next year to approve. Do you know anything about that, Laura? How about the first Thursday?
We decided we needed to get this in early, just in case there weren't any other meetings. That means you know that you're going to have meetings before the end of the year, just because we covered our bases. But we have a time frame, we have to have the schedule in. So we do have, I believe, a couple of, I think there was one meeting that we had to put on a different date because next year, 4th of July, happens to fall on a Thursday. So you will see that date is different in there. So mark your calendars if you decide to approve this. So.
Okay, item number 8, communications. There's an ordinance amendment.
You need to take action on it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so that was,
Yes,
that was the schedule?
that is the schedule, and unless you guys have questions or,
So what are we going to do in July? Are we just going to do it like on the...
no, we have a
11th, or-
different date listed. I just wanted to say that date happens
Oh,
to not
gotcha.
fall on your regular meeting date because,
So you're saying somewhere in this packet there's a... Okay, everyone besides me has seen this, right? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the schedule. Scott and Mike. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
thank you.
Okay, that's approved. All right, now we move to item number 8, communications. An ordinance amendment.
Hello, I'm speaking to you from the other side. The past almost 2 years, planning staff has been working on an ordinance amendment to the downtown ordinance that affects mostly, there's a section for Cottage District. We've addressed some changes on Automobile Alley. There's some general downtown changes about fences, and there's some minor corrections to the urban design section. So I wanted to present this to the Riverfront because, as you know, some of your areas have a DBD or DTD1 base zoning. So the changes I'm describing affect the base zoning, not the overlay. So the base zoning changes have gone to Downtown Design Review, and they've recommended approval. They've gone to Planning Commission, and it's going to be set for introduction at Planning Commission on September 27th. But because you may see cases that reference the updated downtown guidelines, I wanted to briefly go over what those were so you would be aware. But I'm presenting this for information only. We don't need a recommendation from Riverfront. Cottage District, some of you may be aware, you may have participated in a big series of stakeholder workshops and meetings last summer, 2 summers ago is when we started it. With all the development activity happening in Cottage District, various stakeholders had asked us to look at if the regulations needed to be updated, and if so, how. The results of that were to adopt the downtown development framework. That was one of the original questions, was if the DDF was appropriate for Cottage District, and if so, how. The consensus of the stakeholder group was that it was. Riverfront has also adopted this as a supplemental resource, so you should be pretty familiar with it. There were some design guidelines that referenced, when it actually was going to be the Cottage District, but now that it's become more contemporary style homes, a lot of the design guidelines the stakeholders didn't think applied. One thing we struggle with a lot in the downtown regs and guidelines are the fence regulations. They're unusually detailed. They detail the pickets, that there are pickets, the picket spacing, the picket width. They leave almost no room for any sort of innovation. And any applicant who wants to do something different almost always has to get a variance. So we're moving all of that stuff to guidelines. The heights, maximum heights, so front yard is 4 feet, side yard is 8 feet. The maximum heights are going to stay the same as regulations, but everything else about materials, pickets or no pickets, vertical, horizontal, all of that will move to guidelines. There was also some language. It wasn't completely clear that staff had authority to issue administrative approvals in the Cottage District, so we're cleaning that up. Automobile Alley, stakeholders group met and debated on the question. The original question was if a guideline book called the Automobile Alley Guidelines for the Next Century, if it was still relevant to the district. When the book was, when the guidelines were written, the next century was the century we're in. It was written 20 years ago. So staff analyzed those guidelines against the building rehabilitation guidelines, against the existing ordinance, against the downtown development framework, and found that everything in the guidelines for the next century was covered between all the other resources, so that we didn't need to adopt it. The only thing that wasn't covered was the issue of height, relative height in the heart of Automobile Alley. So this ordinance will provide for a maximum height north of 6th Street and a different maximum height south of 6th Street. Above 6th Street, it would be 80 feet, and below 6th Street, it's 140 feet. Again, the intent of that is to respect the existing buildings in the heart of the historic district. There are staff, we keep a running list of things we notice that applicants and the committee struggles with, Scrivener's errors, all that kind of stuff. We keep a list of those things so that we can pick it up in the next ordinance update, and we have done that. Urban design, when at some point the Paseo Business District was under the review of the Historic Preservation Commission, but then several years ago it was moved under the purview of Urban Design Commission. When that was changed, they didn't strike the HP guidelines relative to Paseo, which causes all sorts of confusion for applicants. So we are striking the old language that was supposed to be struck 5 years ago. So, like I said, we have gone to Urban Design Commission, we've gone to Downtown Design Review, we've gone to Planning Commission, Urban Development Committee, and now I'm here. Again, I just wanted you guys to be aware of it because some of your cases may be reacting to some of these changes. So I can go into more detail. I believe I inserted the chart in your packet of exactly what changed.
Okay, we'll move to item 8B. There just lists a couple cases that were administratively approved. Item C is comments from the planning staff. Do we have any further comments?
Currently, I don't have anything I'm working on for next month. However, we will let you know in a week or so if we are going to cancel that meeting, just to allow a little space in here if something pops up, because I know you guys really like to meet. And
Trying to get some momentum. Okay, item D, we have any comments from committee members? Okay, if not, Laura will let us know whether we meet next month. So we're adjourned.